Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about Pathfinder 2E and Dungeons & Dragons 6e and the timing that Pathfinder 2E presents for Dungeons & Dragons 6e. So I got a great comment yesterday from a user, Mark Marham. He had actually commented on the Pathfinder 2E video, and he brought up a good point about Pathfinder 2E serving as a Dungeons & Dragons 6e. It was a really good call out, because I hadn't really been thinking about Pathfinder 2E in conjunction with Dungeons & Dragons 6e, right? So 6e, of course, is the next version of Dungeons & Dragons, and Wizards of the Coast has said within the last 3 months that they really are not planning for Dungeons & Dragons 6e, okay? But one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated with Pathfinder 2e is the lessons that can be learned from Pathfinder 2e. And one of the things that is very interesting is one of the designers for Pathfinder 2e on their Twitter account declared that they had been working on Pathfinder 2e for 2 years, right? Now, there had been some clues as early as like 3 months ago, maybe as far back as 6 months ago, that there would be a Pathfinder 2e. But the reality is, I think one of the lessons learned from looking at Pathfinder 2e is companies are incredibly careful about announcing a new edition, and they need to be, because it's fraught with peril and it's filled with potential, and it excites, and excitement stirs up. It excites and stirs up the community, right? So it has both good beneficial aspects, and it has bad, disadvantageous aspects. So it can really be wary, right? So one of the things I was thinking is, so let's break it down. One, I don't think Pathfinder 2e has almost any chance of serving as Dungeons & Dragons 6e. The reason why is Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition was a great simplification of the Dungeons & Dragons rule set. And in addition to that, not only did they keep the Dungeons & Dragons rule set very, very simple, right? Not only did they do that in the rule set, but they also kept it simple by not putting out a lot of additional content rules-wise, right? So the only real content that has existed for Dungeons & Dragons 5e rules-wise, there was just a whole bunch of hardback adventures, right? Which was a really different product line. But last year, Xanathar's Guide to Everything was the first actual new races, new classes, new rules, right? And everything in that book had been baked through Unearthed Arcana, right? And they had gotten feedback. So the level of balance in that content was very, very high. So it literally took 4 years before they released a single player option book. Not just one player option book. Now, to be clear, Xanathar's Guide to Everything was the fastest Dungeons & Dragons selling product in the history of Dungeons & Dragons. Wizards of the Coast just announced that at the Gamma show, the Gamma 2018 show, which is like the game manufacturer's show. Very, very fascinating. All right, so they are keeping the game simple from a rules perspective, and they're keeping the content light. Right, they're like, right now, if you want to play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and you want to be a high-end player and you want to know all the different options that exist for it, there's really only 2 books. There's the player handbook, and there is the Xanathar's Guide to Everything, which is pretty interesting. So now Pathfinder's coming from a perspective of 20 source books, right? And one of the things they've done that they've already announced with Pathfinder 2e is that they have no intention of getting rid of any races and no intentions of getting rid of any classes, which means that book is going to be huge right out of the gate, right? Which means they're not learning from the lessons that Dungeons and Dragons has already learned, right? Now they could be doing that with full knowledge and saying, we desire to keep our own community. We really don't want to attract new players. Not in large numbers. Maybe we'll get a few here and there, right? So that is, so I don't think there's any possibility that Pathfinder 2E will serve as the new Dungeons & Dragons 6th. However, the announcement of Pathfinder 2E is a major TRPG event. It really, it kicks a lot of dust into the air, and it gets into the issue of, what are we going to do now? So what does Wizards of the Coast, how does Wizards of the Coast respond to Paizo's Pathfinder 2E announcement? All right, so let's break it down. Let's think about it, right? So what could WotC do? One thing they could do is they could ignore Paizo, okay? Now, let's talk about that possibility, right? They could say, hey, we're Dungeons and Dragons. We've been around for a while. Right now we're on a high, coming off of Stranger Things, coming off of all these new streaming games, coming off of the success of Critical Role with Matt Mercer, all these really, really unique aspects for the game, right? Things that have given Dungeons & Dragons specifically an incredible amount of momentum, right? So they could say, we could ignore it, right? Now, I don't think there's any possibility they'll ignore it. And the reason why is specifically because of what happened with 4th edition. I think they realize, Paizo is a real company. They have a real building. They have real employees. They have a real community. They have a market. They serve a specific subset of the Dungeons and Dragons market. And at this point, as low as Paizo has fallen, they absolutely cannot be ignored. Whenever they put out a game, it comes out in beautiful hardcover. It's full color. Goes right into Barnes & Noble, thousands of copies printed. They're too much of a competitor to just absolutely ignore. Mike Mearls is still design lead over at Dungeons & Dragons, and I just think he's too smart of a guy to ignore Paizo 2E, right? Pathfinder 2E. So that means I believe there are at least one meeting within the Wizards of the Coast headquarters where, with that design team, and they said, okay, let's talk about Pathfinder 2E. Might have been a bullet point in one of their meetings, or might have been an entire meeting, or might have been a week's worth of meetings, right? But regardless, I really believe that the design team talked about Pathfinder 2E. There's absolutely no way you walk out of a conversation with our TRPG professional designers talking about Pathfinder 2E and you don't mention 6E, right? So already the question has come up of, do we launch Pathfinder 6E? Now, I can tell you right now, I don't see a Dungeons & Dragons new edition. There's no way they're going to announce this year at Gen Con. They might announce, they're not going to announce in 2018. There's going to be no announcements of a new version within 2018. There's a possibility of an announcement of Dungeons & Dragons 6E in 2019, and I think there's a high probability of a Pathfinder 6E announcement in 2020. Okay, now this goes a little further, right? So actually, I not only think that they absolutely met because of Pathfinder 2E, I think Wizards of the Coast knew, and Mike Mearls specifically, knew about Pathfinder 2E 3 to 6 months ago, right? And in my opinion, I believe that Pathfinder 2E is one of the things that prompted the hiring of Kate Welch as the new designer for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, right? And the reason why is I really believe that Kate Welch was brought in to be trained to be the lead designer on 6E. The reason why is, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is starting to spin down. It's getting long in the teeth. And I think, we are going to be looking at an announcement 2 to 3 years from now, and then another year or two for 6th edition, right? And I think that will be enough to really give everybody a chance to not be shocked and not be upset when it's announced, right? And a lot of people are probably going to be saying, well, why not just leave it alone? You don't need a new edition, right? Well, I really think that's another lesson learned from Pathfinder 2e is Pathfinder 2e is the most grognardiest community that exists within tabletop role-playing games at scale. They are the community that is absolutely most resistant to a new edition. And Pathfinder could not go 10 years without... Pathfinder, when it hit 10 years, it needed a new edition, right? And so I think that's the issue is the world changes so quickly that I don't think any real scaled tabletop role-playing game company in the world will actually keep their version, will actually not iterate their version at least once within a decade. I don't think a game can go over 10 years anymore. It just doesn't happen, right? And if you look at the big tabletop role-playing games out there, I don't think there's any exception to this. I was thinking about this. The only exception I can think of is Rifts. Rifts is still on. You know what? Maybe even Rifts has a second edition. Wow, that's a good quote. I know Rifts also went to Savage Worlds, which I'm not really sure that was like. There's so little change between. The Savage World rules are a little bit different, and I really like the Rifts conversion. But Rifts, and it does seem like Palladium's one of the few people who are still on 1E, right? But even with that, Rifts is a little bit of a very unusual game, and so. But generally, I really think you're going to need to change. So, I really think Pathfinder 2e was one of the things that prompted the prompted the hiring of Kate Welch, a brand new Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition designer. And I really think that right now, Kate Welch continues to be trained to be the lead designer on 6th. I think that's the plan. There's a lot of wisdom within that. I think she has really strong digital talent, and so I think she's going to be able to take the game in a direction it's never been before. That's one thing too that we're seeing right now is that really the momentum of tabletop role-playing games is coming from streaming. Now that that's just a fact. There's no two ways around it. So those are my thoughts on how Pathfinder 2e actually affects the timing of Pathfinder of Dungeons & Dragons 60. Take care.